welcome to a very special cover story conversation. Today we have with us Nisha Desai-Biswal. She is the president of the US-India Business Council. She's also the senior vice president for India Strategy and Global Initiatives for South Asia at the US Chamber of Commerce. And we all knew her. She's a familiar face from the Obama administration, where she was the Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs. Welcome to this conversation, Nisha. And first of all, at a time like this, when Indian origin politicians are really in the focus, whether it's Kamala Harris, people like yourself, Rishi Sunak in the UK, it's a good time to be of Indian origin, right?
Indeed. I think people of Indian origin are actually doing quite well all around the world, politically, in the business community, and arts, entertainment as well. So it's wonderful to see the achievements globally.
But having said that, is there some reason why the focus right now is so much on India? Is there, or is just happened?
Well,
I would separate.
Yeah, I would separate out the fact that India itself is a rising and dominant partner and player on the global scene, with the successes and achievements of Indian Americans, which I think is just due to the fact that you have a widespread diaspora, that you have talent that has cropped up around the world in many different localities. And I think talent is going to rise no matter where it is and what it is doing. And so I think you see that in many different immigrant communities, but the South Asian immigrant community is certainly one that has achieved many great things in many different countries.
Okay, I do want to know your story and our viewers to know about your success, but I want to get in a couple of awkward questions in first also. There is also, a feeling that we recently saw an editorial also, that while India really celebrates the success of its Indian origin people outside, the feeling is not reciprocated. I mean, I know this is an out of syllabus question, but of late there seems to be, whether it's Kamala Harris coming down on Article 370 or otherwise also, you all cater more to your local constituents than the constituency back home, and that makes sense.
So I think you have to again look at this in a nuanced way. On the one hand, whether it's Vice President Harris or any other politician or leader that has a South Asian heritage, there's certainly a very strong desire to deepen and strengthen ties between the United States and India. And I know that the Vice President has articulated that. And we've seen that in politicians of Indian origin, be they Australian or UK or Canadian, et cetera. On the other hand, Vice President Harris, as was the case with me when I was in government, and any other South Asian American, Indian American politician or official, is going to articulate the views and the values of the United States, of the government that they represent and that they work on behalf of. And that means you can both be invested in the growth of US-India ties and have different views on certain issues. As Indian politicians will have varying different views, which they are not shy about articulating on, US policies. So I think that that's something that can be respected in both directions.
Fair enough. That's a good answer. But we've also, wanted to talk to you about, your story. You're of Gujarati origin. You studied in Gujarat rather, and then you migrated to the US. A little bit, if you can share with us, with our viewers, your story.
Well, my own story is just a classic American dream, which is that, growing up the daughter of immigrant parents, and myself having emigrated to the United States at a young age, I found that there was just tremendous opportunity ahead of me as I engaged in my career in public service. I mean, I was very much influenced by the history of my grandparents and my parents, my grandparents having worked towards Indian independence, as did so many of their generation, and the sacrifices that they made. My parents, who sacrificed so much just to create a better life and opportunity for their children. And so I wanted to make sure that my own career was reflective of all of that, and that I was able to work on things that were bigger than myself, that were part of a kind of larger impact in my country, the United States, and in the world. And so I started out, early on, working with the Red Cross, with the International Red Cross, working overseas. And then I evolved into a career in international development and humanitarian aid for the US government, and then for the US Congress. And really that led me to my most recent stint in government during the Obama administration. I had the privilege of meeting with President Obama when he was a senator-elect, and was really honored to serve his administration when he became the president. Starting out again with international development when I was the head of Asia, but really the connection between economic development and political security and strategic interests is very strong. And so in the second term, had the opportunity to serve as the Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asia, where I was able to play a key role in really advancing our ties with not only India, which obviously is the most important partner across that region, but also really deepen our relationships throughout the region, whether it be with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Central Asian states, etc. And it really underscored for me how comprehensive a foreign policy approach one can have that integrates not only the geopolitical implications and interests, but also actually looks at the economic ties, looks at, in the case of India, really a whole of government and whole of society approach to building a bilateral relationship. So it was really just a pride and privilege. And then I left government at the end of the Obama administration and came to the US Chamber, because the economic ties and the trade ties really are so important to the overall relationship, and one where I felt like we could really impact the direction and insert more ambition into our trade relationship. So that's where I've been over these past 4.5 years.
So what is it like, working in the U.S. administration from Obama to Biden, and also being a woman, because as you know, I don't know, we've been following events in India. We're going to probably choose a second woman president. She's also a tribal lady. So, but much is being made about the gender card. How is it over there in the U.S. also? Is it a privilege or is it a disadvantage?
Oh, no, I would never call it a disadvantage. I mean, obviously, in the United States and around the world, women are still working to overcome certain gender biases in business, in government, etc. But I would say that by and large, I have had just a tremendously positive experience. I think there was such a strong effort to make sure that there was equality of opportunity in both the Obama administration, and certainly we're seeing that in the Biden administration, though I'm not serving in the Biden administration right now. And what we saw was, I served concurrently with 5 other women as regional assistant secretaries of state. And that was tremendous and unprecedented. There was only one male assistant secretary of state for East Asia when I was serving. And that's indicative of the fact that women are, in fact, holding more and more high positions in government and in business.
But we're also talking at the time when the Roe versus Wade judgment has been overturned. So that's putting a lot of focus on how, women's rights and the US.
Yeah, Roe v. Wade, first of all, let me just say this is a deeply polarizing issue in many parts of the country and for many people. And so people will come at it with their own views and perspectives. And certainly the US Chamber has not taken any view or opined on the Supreme Court ruling in Dobbs. But I will say that the fact that it upended settled precedent, what was believed to be settled precedent, has really shaken many people in terms of what that means on the continuity and the stability of the laws of the land. And so that, I think, is going to be a major galvanizing force in both directions for those who believe very much that that choice should be held by women and their doctors and their families, and rather than by the government, and those who feel like there should be a national policy. I think that this is going to be a very important debate and discussion across the country, and it will affect the elections in 2022 as well as in 2024.
I'm sure, because that's also being debated over here. I mean, the judgment, we made everybody take a relook at our laws. A lot of TV studios, it created a lot of conversation, in fact, around it. But coming back to what you said about trade and commerce, I was looking at one of your other interviews you gave 7 months ago to an Indian channel, where you said that trade between India and US should not necessarily be limited to make in India and buy in America. It has to be a more, balanced relationship between the two.
Well, look, I think there are many deep convergences and synergies between the United States and India. That is the case when it comes to much of our kind of strategic outlook, though we may have areas where we have historical ties and historical differences, legacy relationships that need to be accommodated. In the case of trade, I see such broad scope for advancement, but we have fundamentally different approaches on trade that need to be resolved and reconciled, including the fact that, India tends to take a more protectionist attitude simply because it has a more nascent economy. But as the Indian economy continues to grow and become a dominant force, India will only benefit from opening up and liberalizing its trade policies because it stands to be a global player. So rather than approaching it from the perspective of protecting the Indian market, one can think about creating the kind of investment in India that allows India to really engage the global market. And trade agreements are a big part of that. Market liberalization is a big part of that. Market access is a big part of that. And, regulatory stability and transparency is a big part of that. Now, I think India has been making all the right moves in that direction and sees the opportunity that as companies are looking to de-risk their supply chains, that there is a real opportunity for India to attract many of these important supply chains into the Indian geography. And I think that this is going to be a huge driver of economic growth for India moving forward if it can harmonize its policies to support its stated goals and objectives in trying to bring in that kind of investment, that kind of production capacity in India.
I'm going to take a break and come back and keep this conversation going. So stay with us. We're taking a quick short break. Hello and welcome back to Cover Story. We're in conversation with Nisha Vishwal. We're talking to her about, a whole lot of things. But now I just want to focus a bit more on your experiences. You've been dealing with the Indian administration when you were part of the Obama government. How did you find dealing with India? Who all did you interact with? You've also been given a prestigious award, I think in 2017, if I'm not, no, the Samman Award. The interaction with who all did you meet in terms of the Indian government?
Well, Priya, let me just say, interacting and representing the United States in the US-India relationship has really been the honor and privilege of a lifetime for me. It was fantastic opportunity to work towards bringing our two countries closer together and deeper in our strategic partnership with each other. For me, that meant not only a deep engagement with my counterparts in the Ministry of External Affairs, where obviously I worked very, very closely with my counterparts in the Indian Foreign Ministry, whether that was at the Joint Secretary level or the Foreign Secretary level, working with then Ambassador Jaishankar and then Foreign Secretary Jaishankar, who is now the External Affairs Minister, colleagues on the Indian side like Ambassador Sandhu. When I first took on this position, it was Nirupama Rao, who was the ambassador here. So it was just a whole range of officials in the foreign ministry. And of course, I had the great privilege of working and interacting with Sushma Swaraj. But the US-India relationship is so broad-based that being that chief relationship manager on the US side, I was able to engage with and facilitate a deepening of our relationship across the whole of government. And that meant that whether it was the finance ministry, whether it was the commerce ministry, and I had the privilege of working with Arun Jaitley, who I deeply respect and admired, with Nirmala Sitharaman, who, as a woman leader who has been such a shatterer of glass ceilings, having been the first woman to be the commerce minister, the defense minister, and now the finance minister, and she's such an inspiring figure. Working with the Minister of Power at the time, now the Commerce Minister, Minister Piyush Goyal, Dharmendra Pradhan, Hardeep Puri, so many people across the entirety of the government, and of course, the deep engagement with the PMO and with the Prime Minister.
You have a special USP in today's PMO. You're from Gujarat, the land of the Indian Prime Minister.
Indeed, I think it was a point of connection with the Prime Minister. I had the privilege of being able to interact with him in Gujarati, which is a language that I speak at home with my parents and family members as well. So that was really special.
Any advice that you have for young girls or who want to get a career into in administration or government, whether in India or in the US? Is that
well? First of all, I would just say that for women, the world is your oyster in that sense, that the opportunities are boundless and limitless, but it does not mean that they are easily come by. And so one has to be persevering in our ambitions in order to achieve what we want to achieve. And if you are a young woman who has your heart set on a certain career path or certain positions, you really have to be tenacious. And sometimes you have to be creative. If the door is not open, you have to think about how you pick that lock. How do you get that door to open for you? What are the different ways and pathways that are available to you? And sometimes it's taking a more meandering or circuitous path to get to where you want to be. The other thing I would say is you have to develop a little bit of a thick skin, because there will be people who doubt you. There will be people who underestimate you. There will be people who try to block you. And if you allow them to set the narrative, if you allow those who are not interested in your success to have the say at the end of the day, then you are, in a sense, giving up the control over your own destiny, over your own power, over your own path forward. And so I would just say, you know, for a woman to succeed, as with any individual, you have to be willing to be thick-skinned, be tenacious, and be creative.
That's a very promising word, and I think very sound words of advice. Before I let you go, just a couple of questions about, back to the topic of trade and commerce, because we also had a time where, we have the war with your Russia-Ukraine war. We also have the issue of the shadow of China. India is hoping, we're all hoping that India can, step in where the vacuum that is being created by China. Do you see that happening in terms of commerce, trade, manufacturing?
Well, look, I think India has been stepping up and stepping into roles of leadership across many different spheres. And certainly we have seen the emergence of Indian leadership as a really consequential force on the global stage. There has been a recognition that both in the business community and in the strategic community, that an overdependence on any one country, be it China or elsewhere, can create political risk and can create economic risk. And that has led both countries and the corporate sectors to look at creating a more multi-vectoral economic policy, trade policy, and foreign policy. And it has led companies to really look to de-risk and decouple in many areas. And that is to India's advantage. India really has a remarkable opening and opportunity right now to lean in. And I see India doing that, taking advantage of that. I think that you can accelerate India's rise. I think you can accelerate the trade and investment cycles that are increasingly moving in India's direction. But some of that lies with the Indian government in the decisions that are made. And I have confidence that the team that is in place are able stewards of that destiny.
As regarding e-commerce, is there a feeling that there is too much regulation in India, or there is not consistency of regulation?
I do think that India has an opportunity to try to simplify. What happens is investment flows like water. It flows in the direction of least resistance, right? It takes the path of least resistance. And the extent to which you can create a ecosystem that has less regulatory burden while still taking the precautions that you need to take to safeguard your economic interests, but really minimizing the regulatory burdens, harmonizing policies. Oftentimes what happens is that different government agencies will have different approaches to the same policy goals and guidelines. And those different approaches create a lot of discordance in the regulatory environment. So the extent in e-commerce, in other aspects of digital trade and digital economy, the extent to which India can really harmonize its regulatory approaches and relieve some of that burden, India, I think, particularly because it has this enormous market, has an opportunity to really accelerate e-commerce. And sometimes the perceptions in India of e-commerce is that it will displace the traders and merchants who are reliant on an in-person economy. But what I would say is that any displacement that takes place will be replaced by the enormous growth opportunity to access global markets. The more that we can see e-commerce players sourcing from India with Indian producers for the global market, and connecting Indian producers with their own market in greater efficiency, so that a local merchant has access to the national, market across India. That's what the GST was designed to do, was to create a single market in India. And so the regulatory policies should also seek to do the same.
On that note, Nisha Biswal, thank you so much for this conversation, and we look forward to having more conversations with you. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Good seeing you, Priya.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.